Hey, it's Alan here.
And Bre. And
And
we
we
are
are
the hunter and the hippie.
Connected through yoga and bonded by our love of the wild places and the love for outdoors, we've come together to share our conversations about life.
Well, maybe more so what we've learned or are continuing to learn about life.
And there's no one way to do it. Life, that is.
And hopefully provide you with some teeny tiny bits of inspiration to connect deeper with yourself, others, and our great Mother Earth.
All right. Enough already about the podcast. Let's just get to the podcast. Hey,
What's up?
how's it going?
Oh, it's great.
We started talking already prior to hitting the record button, so I think we're gonna have a fun chat today. We have to try to back it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Do we want to
rewind, start over?
Yeah. Do you? That makes me think of Ace Ventura. Have you seen the movie Ace Ventura: Pet Detective with Jim Carrey?
I mean, yes, but it's been a while.
when he's in the tutu and he's like checking out the mental health facility.
Oh yeah.
And he like does he's like acting like a football player. Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh Lord, it's good to see you. Good to see you.
I know.
I know. I know we just talked, but I'm excited. To chat again.
But in like the podcast world, it'll be 2 weeks.
Yes.
To the listeners.
Yes. Yeah. And this is episode 25.
No, it's 24.
No, it's not. Is it?
No, yes, it is. Because you kept saying the last one was 24, and so yesterday I just actually went through. I counted them, but also on our YouTube, if you're watching with us, I put the episode number before everyone, and we are on.
All right. So this is 24.
24. Yeah.
So that means we have 2 more, and that's a year. We've been doing this. We've been doing this a year. I mean, it's definitely been longer than a year because we had to get everything set up and recruit your brother for music and all sorts of stuff. But I can't believe it's been a year.
Yeah. Look at that.
It's wild. A lot has happened. We're gonna have to do like a recap episode of like what's happened in this year.
Well, maybe we do like a sound bites episode.
Oh, that'd be cool.
The best of.
All right.
Tell us what people, everyone out there. Thank you for listening. Tell us what your favorite episodes have been.
Yeah.
Over the last year.
And if there's any topics you want to hear us talk about.
Mm-hmm. Always. Yeah.
You want to start us off with some breathing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. We've been doing these morning podcasts, and
I love it.
I get to enjoy my coffee.
I know.
It's pretty awesome. So, all right. Wherever you are, just finding either a comfortable seat or kind of relaxing the body if you are doing something right now. And you can close your eyes or find a soft gaze. And then just moving your awareness into your natural breath, noticing how it flows in and out. Noticing the difference in the temperature of the air as you breathe in. Maybe the coolness. And then the temperature as you breathe out. A slight warmth. And then bring awareness to your thoughts. Without creating any specific thoughts, but just noticing what's moving through the mind. Just observing them as they naturally come and go. Maybe the same thought is repeating over and over. Begin to imagine these thoughts as if they're on a TV screen. You might visualize it or just sense that you're watching your thoughts. And become aware of the space around that TV screen. The endless space that surrounds it, that's behind all that's going on. Noticing this difference between the thoughts and in the space that contains these thoughts. And simply feel yourself as that space. Feel yourself as the container of the thoughts while separate from them. Just observing. Just resting back as the space, as the witness. And take a moment to create a thought. Maybe create another one or watch it change. And take a deep inhale. And a nice, long, slow exhale. Allow yourself to take with you this idea you are the creator of all that's happening. But you are also not all that's happening. When you feel ready, slowly fluttering your eyes open.
Thank you. Nothing like bringing us to the moment. I was thinking my thoughts as you were saying it was right. I was just thinking about our time over the last year, and I love that we have breath incorporated into every one of our episodes. Right, if you're listening and you tend to skip over these, right? Like, they're breathing. Like, don't stop it, right? We want you to breathe because it's good for you, right? You're supposed to be breathing. You're supposed to be in tune with your breath. And yeah, I'm reading or I'm listening to an audiobook right now called No Mud No Lotus, and the breath is just what keeps you in the present moment, and it has this. It's funny. There's this really simple thought around enlightenment, and um, and it's gotten me thinking about enlightenment and being enlightened, and I don't know where I stand on it right now, but like I've always had this ideology of what enlightenment is, and it's like this like unattainable, right, like level of being, I guess, and in the way that he talks about it in the book is it's actually way more simple, and now I see it as way more attainable, right. And I guess some of my thought about it around it is like, I don't want, right, like I would never be like, I'm so enlightened, look at me. Like, that's not the point of enlightenment. And in the book he talks about, like, he says something along the lines of, oh, you're mindful of your breath, you're enlightened. Like, you're mindful of the actions that you take in a specific moment, that's enlightenment. And it's not this like grandiose point, like destination that you arrive to, and instead it's this thing that you live every day. And so it's gotten me thinking about that, because I'm always like I'm not enlightened, don't like consider me, like, it's funny, I've had people try to like call me like guru, and I'm like, please don't. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm not this higher being above anyone else. And but just hearing his perspective on it, it makes you think like, oh, maybe we can be enlightened. And and again, it's not about like being better or higher than anyone else, it's just specifically about being in the moment. And so that's where like my thoughts went around, like, when you're breathing and having us come back to our breath, and it's just because that's all you have, right, is your breath. That's it, and it's in this moment, right? It's when we start thinking about the past and the future that gives us anxiety or fear. And it's, I don't know, just that was just my thought process and during that breath.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said, enlightenment is not being above or beyond our humanity. And I think spot on, like a if someone says they're enlightened, they're probably not. That word spiritual bypass comes to mind too. And I loved in one of my trainings with the Amrit Institute, they talk about needing to be, they have these 3 circles, and it's thinking, feeling, and being. And you can't be stuck in one of the circles. You have to be in all of them. And so with spiritual bypassing, people think, well, I'm just going to be. I'm just going to go straight to being. I'm going to skip over, the feeling and the thinking. And that's not right. That's not enlightenment.
Yeah.
It's being able to get to that place of being within all of the thinking and the doing, or the thinking and the doing and the feeling. And kind of what inspired this meditation today was when I was out this past weekend. It was a Sunday. It snowed. Woke up to like a ton of snow surrounding the tent and got out, but it's that, and it was still snowing, and it's that quiet of the woods, of the mountains when it's snowing, or after a night of snowing. And because you can't hear your footstep, right? The footsteps are soft as you're walking, and it's just, there's just a feeling to it. And I was thinking about just the whole 2.5 days that I went hunting, and gosh, how freaking loud my mind was. Like, just like so much thinking.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, okay, now pay attention, and not that I wasn't in tune. I mean, it's the most in tune. Hunting has been the most in tune with my external environment that I've ever been in. But what stood out was, then we went and grabbed a burger after 2.5 days of being in the woods, being really quiet, like, not, and there was just so much stimulation. And what was really distinguishable was, in life, right? In everyday life, we have all those distractions and stimulation and things going on that it's so easy to become our thoughts.
Yep.
To be our thoughts. We think we're our thoughts. But
Mm-hmm.
when the whole thing with like meditation, with yoga, with hunting, maybe it's running, whatever it is, when you get to one, slow it down enough, but also quiet all of the external stimulus, and those thoughts become louder and louder.
Yeah.
It actually allows you to see that you aren't them. You get to just actually, whoa, look at all these things going on, like going here and there. How did that come? Where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we've talked about before is like meditation isn't, you might get I get moments of silence, of stillness,
Yeah.
where the thoughts get so slow that I get to experience the gaps between the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's about observing that they're there,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not them, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what's really beautiful is like, I think sometimes we can get really have this idea of what it looks like. And what you're saying and kind of leads into our topic is, right, it's that mindfulness, that consciousness
Yep.
of our everyday life. That's enlightenment.
Yeah. Yep. It's being in the moment fully. Mm-hmm. For whatever it is, right? Whatever the thoughts are, whatever, right? If there's silence, if there's noise, right? Like you described two very easily contrastable items, right? Like you talk about being in the woods alone and then going to get a burger back in the city. And it's fun. And like all I could picture, right? I picture the sound being internal in the woods, and then I picture the sound switching external. Right? So it's like this outward, right? Like in the woods, it's the silence, right? Like it's so silent, but yet it's so deafening, right? Of your thoughts, and it's the sound coming out from the body. And then and then you just switch, and then it's all of a sudden it's sound coming into the body, and it's so both are stimulating. You said it right, like one is stimulating, and in my mind, both are stimulating, right? It's just where is it coming from? And for me in that moment, it's like what, right? Like this again, this thinking, what, and feeling like what are you thinking? Why are you thinking it? And it's not why are you thinking it, like you have to have this like answer. It's just why does that thought exist, and just trying to dig into it. And then when you switch to the external and like you hear something, and just again the same thing, well, why did that happen, and what's the thoughts and the feelings that come with that. And, yeah, and then to your point, it's about being mindful in the moment, and what are we consuming, and how are we consuming it, and how do we move through both scenarios in life? How do we move through our chaos in our mind and our chaos on the external plane?
And that's, I think, a lot of the work I do with clients is like, we're not trying to eliminate, like, I mean, that's, again, we're humans and have to live in this world.
Yeah.
So it's not about, again, that alignment isn't about eliminating it all, but it's how can you have equanimity, or how can you find this peace or ease within all of that chaos. And that's where I think that like, not to control the external, but you get to choose what you consume, right? You get to choose what you consume, whether that's food that's nourishing for your body, or consumption isn't just about food. It's about what you buy. It's about what the people you surround yourself. It's about what you read. It's about it's even about work, right? Even though we're quote unquote outputting in our jobs, there is something we are consuming.
Yeah, and you before we started recording, you had said, you had mentioned you started talking about like buying knowledge, right? And so many of the books that we read, right? It may be fiction, it may be nonfiction, but what is in there? What are you consuming, and what are you becoming from that? And then, right, right, based on your knowledge and what you're consuming, if if today there was a right, if today the internet went away, the Google went away, right, how would you be able to survive?
Mm-hmm.
And
this was all before we started recording.
Mm-hmm.
It was inspired by Candace Owens talks about a cyber pandemic, which is I think the World Economic Forum did role play is not the right word. I can't remember the proper word for it, but mm-hmm. She talks about basically a cyber pandemic would be something where they would shut down all, like, the internet, but mm-hmm. also everything. And she talks about how often she's like, I just Google something, and so she's buying books mm-hmm. to have, and like, what do you actually know? Like, what do you retain? What is in? And I think it's important to know we can't. Part of like the predicament of our situation, right, is we can't possibly absorb and know everything and research everything about everything. Mm-hmm. And so then we rely on quote unquote experts, but that's also become social media and just general media as our experts.
Yeah.
And but all that to say is, like, if that everything went down, where would you, how would you be able to survive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And last year I'm already making this like 2022. This was it this year? I believe it was this year, where Texas froze over, and mm-hmm. And their whole entire electric grid went down. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to see the chaos that ensued mm-hmm. from that. And what's really interesting is that, right, we take the Google for granted, right? It's, you have a problem, oh, let me Google it and see how to fix it, or how to overcome the hardship, and really, like, what would we know how to handle it if we didn't have Google? And it's funny, if there's any older people, I know like your mom listens to this, and you're right, but there's a whole generation of people still that lived this way prior. Mm-hmm. Right? There was a time in the very recent past where Google didn't exist. Mm-hmm. Both you and I grew up in that. Right? Yeah. There was a time where we didn't have computers and the internet, and I was getting information from a set of encyclopedias from the 80s.
In directions. I have some, I don't have the really massive atlas in my mm-hmm. In my car, but I have like a Wyoming one, I have a Colorado one from when I lived in Colorado, and then I do have like a more like bird's eye of the whole US, and I think it goes into Canada, parts of Canada maybe. Mm-hmm. But remember when we used to, like, to get directions somewhere, you pull out an atlas and you flip and you look at it,
and you had to go to like if you were crossing state borders, you had to like
go to the next page. Yeah. And like, and it's really fascinating, because that is one little practice I do for my brain. Mm-hmm. Is I will not just turn on directions and have it tell me where to go.
Yep.
So I will use, Google Maps, look it up, and then I'll look at their written out directions. I'll look at it, and then I turn it off, and I try to go, or I will screenshot the directions. But that would be the same as if you like open an atlas and wrote out directions. So I'll screenshot the like turn by turn directions, and mm-hmm. I'll use that if I need to. If I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. But then I also get lost. And again, don't try this if you're like on a time constraint to be somewhere, but like start to use your brain
Right.
for like the everyday things. We've outsourced, and it's hard. It's tricky, right? It's like we do need to outsource things, but like think about like everything goes down and you've outsourced your basic living necessity, survival. Where would you be?
Yeah. This was like 2 years ago or something. I had an issue with my phone and I had to leave it at the Apple store.
Yeah.
And I like walked out of the Apple store and I like get in my car and then I'm like, and I forgot I had to go somewhere. I think I had to go to like a Home Depot or something. And I was like, where's there a Home Depot?
Yeah.
Like, uh-oh, like I don't know where anything is. And I have no clue how to get there. I'm like, this is really strange. And here I am phoneless. I can't text someone and ask someone. I literally have taken everything that I've outsourced and now it's just me. And I'm like, wow, all right. I have to figure this shit out. And yeah, and it's, imagine if that happened at a much grander scale. You know, and what we started talking about was how do we get food and how do we grow food and you know, how many of us could do that. And you know, one of the things that we had mentioned was talking about like our education levels, and I think a lot of people directly correlate your degree or your level of schooling with your quote education levels. And right, just because you have a PhD, right, you can have all the PhDs in the world, but it doesn't mean that
intelligence.
Yeah,
I would
right.
I would almost use semantics, but
Yeah,
like intelligence level.
Yeah, you might be educated, but you may or may not be intelligent enough to right. Like, you know, I know a lot of people who have no clue how to hunt, and this isn't anything bad, right? I mean, they should, but this isn't anything bad. Like, they have no clue how to get their food. They have no clue how to grow lettuce. And you know what happens if there is a cyber pandemic? And what knowledge do you have? And how would you go? Like, if everything just shut off today, and even, you know, even us who grew up at some point through our life without the internet and, you know, using encyclopedias and atlases and like we've even relied on it. And now it's like, to this point of the story with my phone, I'm even dependent on it. But going back to my thought when Texas froze over, it was really interesting because people were freaking out. And granted, it didn't happen here in Colorado, but I remember people freaking out, and I was just like, why is everyone freaking out? And I was like, if everything froze over here, I wouldn't be worried.
Yeah.
And like, I was just going through, and like, we even talked about it with my wife, talked about it with a group of our friends, and I was like, I got 90 plus days without electricity. Dead of winter, fine. Like, people are like, well, what about the stuff in your fridge? I was like, it's winter. Right, like,
everything's frozen. It's froze over.
Right. I was like, people were worried about things that like they're not even thinking. Right? Like,
yeah.
You're worried about refrigerating your food in the winter? It's literally a giant refrigerator outside.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, what? Like it gave me solace to know that I was like, oh yeah, like I wasn't worried. I'm sure. I'm not saying it would be easy, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it would be easy, but I'm not concerned. Right? Like, if I had to go for a length of time without electricity or without Wi-Fi, right? Like, I would definitely be able to figure it out. And like, we have all of the things to keep us warm. We have the resources. We have water filters from backpacking. It's really funny, you know, that everything that we need to survive is like it's already there, and it's that experience, right? Like, you can have the books are great, but that's just theory, right? It's no, it's me knowing how to use my water filter. It's me knowing, right? I've been in the scenario 5 miles in the backcountry with my buddy Jeff, where both of our water filters froze.
Do you use water filters?
Yeah.
Come on, you got to make that gut a little stronger.
No.
Get yourself a nice. I stopped using water filters.
Are you serious? You just drink?
Oh yeah, just nice dose of Giardia.
Giardia?
No, I haven't. One time maybe, perhaps, but yeah, I stopped using water filters.
You are a brave soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and yeah, you're right. Like gut, increasing our gut biome. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think I'll change, but you're right. Like it can. Right. Like,
well, it's the not. Here's the thing, picking the right water source. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so there's experience, right? Is being out and knowing like, oh, this comes down from a place where everyone's camping by a lake. I'm not going to drink out of that. Mm-hmm. I have drinking out of probably some cow dung, but that was my only option. Right. I survived. I was like, 2 weeks later, I was like, ooh, if I had Giardia, I would be kicking in right now. I'm good. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And but that's the thing, like you learn from experience, mm-hmm. And whether it be which water source do you drink of if you do or don't have a filter, right? What to do, right? When literally both of our water filters froze. We're out of water. What do you do? And the simple answer is that what we did was use your fucking body heat to melt your water filter, mm-hmm. right? Like you don't get water as quickly as you want, but you have resources and you learn how to deal with the problems that are in front of you. And I was sharing stories with my boss.
I need to write. Sorry, I have like 2 things I want to say, so I need to write them. Okay. I'm not. You know me. I'm not a writer.
Bre is writing something down.
I know, but we can go off on tangents, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna forget, and I'm gonna write it down. So your boss, go on.
So it's funny. I was telling my boss and my coworkers just about like the things that I do, and everyone was, a lot of people are like, oh, I need this, and I need comfort, and I need, what's funny is you don't know what you need, right? Especially when we have this comfort of Wi-Fi and the internet. And the way I explained it is, what's really cool about going out and hunting and backpacking is that it makes you realize what you actually need. And mm-hmm. then when you get back to the civilization, you start to question the things that you have and the things that you think you need, because when you realize, oh, all I need is food and water, and oh, it's snowing, okay, I need some shelter and some rain protection, and then everything, what else is everything else? Like, do I really need that? And life becomes so simple. And that's the kind of lives that we start talking about. This is that, like, we want to live these simple lives. It doesn't mean it's easy, it's just simple. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize, hey, I don't need all this stuff. I don't need Louis Vuitton purses and belts and all this material stuff that you think, oh, I need these quote comforts to survive. And that's what being out in the woods really teaches you, is what do you actually need to survive.
Mm-hmm. I forgot. I had 2 things and I forgot one, but then something else came up, so I'm gonna go reverse.
I thought you wrote these down.
I wrote one down, but I was listening so much that I forgot what the second one is.
I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Because you touched on so many things, like, and I was like, oh gosh. I'm gonna go reverse because something came up with just what you were talking about, and I think it's something I've been thinking about, and not just with hunting. This goes with like a lot of outdoor activities, and I think it's really fascinating to see, as our gear evolves, mm-hmm. like there is an element where we lose a little bit, right, of like what we need because we have all this high tech gear. And why that came to mind is 2 Sundays ago, I went hunting with, I don't know if I talked about this, but my friend, he's 67. He's like, I haven't hunted in, he hadn't hunted in like 10 years, but his whole, like, up until he was 57, he'd gone hunting a ton, like everything. He shows up in blue jeans and, probably he's a runner. So he had like a tech shirt, but then a cotton hoodie. And, and then he had like a wind layer, and then he had his jacket, which was like probably like a Carhartt, like one of those like canvas kind of thick jackets. And I just loved it.
I'm like cringing inside.
Yeah, but what did everyone do before we had this ultra light, breathable, like Arc'teryx, and that's the Louis Vuitton of freaking outdoors,
it
right?
Really is. Yep.
And so it's like, again, like how hardcore are we in our fancy gear,
right?
When someone they're just gonna go out in blue jeans and do the same stuff, right? And their heavy hiking boots, and and that's not just hunting, but it's like you see that. Think about like the old time, like Himalayan expeditions and mountaineers, and like what they were capable of with the most like non-technical, it was very technical for them at the time, but now how we've evolved, and we think like, well, this, and I'm fall victim to this. I'm not an exception to it. I try to get items of gear that are like, I didn't buy all new gear for hunting, right? I'm like, yeah, my colors might be off. I don't have camo, but this is fully functional, and deer and elk can't see colors.
I was gonna say,
whatever.
You don't need camo anyway.
I mean, I think the print helps to not be as solid, but it's like I'm in my maroon zip up hoodie. I mean, you're all wearing, like, if you're not archery hunting, it's like you got an orange on, so obviously they can't see color. But it just, it made me think like we start to again buy things even in our simple life of living the outdoor lifestyle in the mountains. It's like you've got your jacket for running, and you've got your jacket for hunting, and you have your jacket for ice climbing, and you have your jacket for skiing and this and that. And it's just, it can be easy to fall into that. Absolutely. And that's what I love about being around like the old school in it who've done this forever, because they don't have the fancy stuff, and they still get it done.
Yep.
Absolutely. So that was like, when, as you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is funny, because it's making me think about, again, like, how did people filter water before there were water filters? You boiled it, right?
Yep.
Boiled it to, or you just drank it.
Yeah. And your gut adjusted.
My buddy Jeff, like, same thing. He's like, oh, I didn't bring, I figured if I ran out of water, I can just drink from a stream. I was like, yes, yes.
Well, it's just like the water in Mexico. Right?
Yeah.
Like, people like, don't drink the water in Mexico. You get Montezuma's revenge. We will.
Yeah.
But the people that live there, you think they're drinking bottled water? You think they're cooking with bottled water? You think they're, right? Like, so clearly there's something different, right? Their bodies have adjusted.
Yeah.
Right? The water isn't not drinkable, right? It's just detrimental to us because we're not used to that. Our gut biome has adjusted and adapted, probably for the worse, right? Where like we go to other countries and we do have to get bottled water. We do have to worry about, oh shit, you put ice in that, damn it! Like now I'm gonna get sick. But yeah, it's so true that you will adjust. Your body, we are resilient. And how did we do it all these years? And again, it goes back to, right, the internet's new. The internet is not old. We lived in a time without it. And it's the same for these hunters, right? They lived in a time without technical clothing, right?
Or onyx.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, onyx is fairly new, but
onyx
yeah,
is
you took printed maps of private land boundaries, and that's how you navigated.
Yeah.
But so the other thing, and you're kind of circling back to it, so I hope it still feels relevant, but you said something about everyone should know how to hunt. And I'm going to disagree with that only because I think that we can't possibly know how to do everything. I think one thing is, and I think because we've moved away from like a tribal way of living, like there's this element that's almost forced us to have to try to, like, if we were to survive, we either need to go back to tribal because we're going to have to rely on different people for their different skill sets. Like not everyone has to know how to do everything, but we have to be, well, one, respect. Right? Like, I think that's what kind of stood out to me is like, you may not need to know how to hunt, but don't be a jerk to the person who does.
Yes.
Because we will depend on each other. Yeah. And that's what that, like, it's that putting together that community. I mean, it's the same thing in a business, right? If you start filling your staff or your team of people with people who know how or have strengths that are the same of yours, you're screwed. Right? And so we have to actually start to use each other as resources, but that comes with respect to build a community of people who can fill the different roles. And maybe it's important, yes, to have an idea, because if you lose that person and you need to survive, but it's like, that I think is big. Like my piece is like, you don't have to know it all. You don't have to be able to do it all, but have the people around you who do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I'm a huge proponent of the village concept. Right? Like that is, it's funny. People will say things like, oh, I got here all by myself. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like you absolutely didn't. Like I used to have that thought, like I did this all by myself. Right? When people thought that I couldn't do it, and that it's a noble thought, but it's wrong. Right? Like you did not get here alone. As long as there's people in this world, right? Like you have used other people to get to where you're at. And we need each other, right? I think that, with globalization, I think that the village concept dies a little bit because we become so numb to like, oh, I just go to the grocery store and there's chicken, and that's where I get my chicken from. Right. And then, we were at Costco yesterday. Right. I do shop at Costco, right? Right. Like you do, right? Like there's modern conveniences and comfort that we all take advantage of. And a grocery store is one of them. And my wife says to me, oh, we need eggs. But I've stopped buying my eggs from grocery stores. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to go to the farm. I have a farm that I go to get my eggs.
Yeah.
Right. Any place that I can go to help support the village, right, is where, I don't know if we said this on recording. I don't think you said this on recording. You'll have to elaborate on this a little bit. But when we were talking, you mentioned, right, like you wanted to make farming cool, and that farming is like dying. And when you think about like farmers, it's all these old guys that are dying or retiring, right? They don't have the energy that they used to. And who's really taking, interest in farming? And it's great. Right up the street, I have this farm, and it's a husband and wife and family, and they have like like jokingly, I say they have like 19 kids, but they have like, I think they have like 8 kids, and she's pregnant again. And it just totally reminds me of like Little House on the Prairie type thing.
Yeah.
And literally, I drive my truck down this dirt road onto their farm, and I get out of the truck. I get greeted by a dog. Like a
Mm,
dog comes running up to me, and and I go and knock on the door, and usually it's like a half an hour plus experience going to get
mm,
eggs, because like we sit there and we talk, and we how's the farm doing, right? Like how are the chickens? They just told me they got a meat cow that like they have to, right, they're
mm,
feeding their own cow for meat, and
mm,
it's not going to be ready for, I think it's like April. And but it's great. And I brought them elk one time, and I gave them elk, and they gave me like 4 dozen eggs, and they're like, we're even, and it's being part of this village, being part of this society that helps each other, live and be resourceful,
mm,
and and knowing that, hey, one day I might be out of meat,
mm,
and or they might be out of eggs, or and using each other to know that, hey, we're going to be successful together,
mm.
and that we have to support each other, and that we can't do it alone,
Yeah.
and there's no way that we can do this alone. And there's the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and I believe that, but I also believe that it takes a village, period, end of
Mm,
sentence, right? Like it takes a village to live,
mm,
to move through life, to be successful in whatever it is that you want to do, right? We have to be there for each other. We have to love each other. We have to support each other.
yeah. I think it's a couple of things came up in that is um one, this idea of, you're going to the farm and you're having that 30-minute conversation. That's a big part of why I moved. And I know I've shared this, why I moved to Wyoming, and what really drew me to the rancher agriculture part of the United States was that people do that. People have your
Mm-hmm.
back, like they have your back, right? And the farmers
Yep.
have each other's back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's the part of the country that from like I'm just going to generalize this, but a lot of like cities or metropolitan areas or like the high intellect areas, they just kind of poop on them.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
say that they don't, and we brought this up like after the 2016 election, they're like, these people shouldn't vote. And I was like, these people who are supplying your grocery stores with
Mm-hmm.
food, who
Mm-hmm.
are the reason that you have any items, have the
Mm-hmm.
energy to create all of the items in your house. But, anyways, I won't go into that rant. But but it's because we're so disconnected from what is part of our village, right? How
Right.
you get food is part of the village, whether that's locally or not. Um, yeah, I don't know where else I was going with that. But the other thing, what made me think of you,
Mm-hmm.
because you have talked about, the village and that you stand on all the people's backs or shoulders. I don't know what the phrase is. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really bad with phrases. Who've like come before you, who taught you. And that's something that really came to mind even with my first season of hunting
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, dating back, like way back to, even like one of my one of my exes who introduced me to winter camping.
Mm-hmm.
Not hunting, but just winter camping,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I wouldn't be where I like have been able to potentially all the things that came between now and hunting, but even just the day waking up and snow had piled up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think about that, and I think about every single person along the way who has given me a skill or exposed me to things that has helped me in this hunting season. Like
Yep.
everything I've gained from you, everything I've gained from like even again people who aren't hunters.
Yep.
But I have this skill of like probably someone who's like so anti-hunter who just really taught me about how to listen in nature, you know, and it's really just really special and cool and amazing to be able to take those morsels and see how they're all infused into that experience. And it's every you know, it's every experience along the way that that really molds you into the present, you know. Yeah, I don't know, that's
you're so right, and hunting is just a good example when it's hunting season or the end of or coming to the end of hunting season for us, and so like it's fresh on our mind, so it's easy to talk about. But when so I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but I had a deer hunt, and I took out a friend who had been hunting like once before and no success, and we got him a deer, and as we're going through and processing the deer in the field, it's funny when I do it, like when I process my elk, when I process any animal, I hear my buddy Jeff. Everything that I do, it's Jeff's talking to me in my head, because right, like it's his years of experience of him standing on his ancestor or his ancestors' shoulders, right? Like his dad and his grandfather and all that, and now I get to stand on his, right? Like I get to hear, so like why do we do certain things when we process? How do we do it? And it's constantly, it's funny, like he's literally talking to me when I do something, because like there's also some things that like I like to do that he doesn't, and vice versa. And like we also, like we have a great relationship, and like we bicker back and forth, we jab at each other, we poke fun, and but he still has had an impact, and I still hear him. And when I was teaching my buddy how to do this, like I try to give both options.
Yeah.
Right. Because, so like an easy one is my buddy Jeff wears gloves when he's quartering an animal, and I don't. And he hates like the fat, because eventually like the fat gets all up in your fingernails, and your hands are covered in blood, and he just doesn't like that. And that's cool. So I don't care. Like my hands are always covered in blood, and the fat in my fingernails, like whatever. It is what it is. And teaching my buddy, I was like, look, if you want to wear gloves, you can wear gloves, and here's the benefit of it, and here's the cons of it. And I don't, and so it's having this knowledge and hearing, and then hearing, like, and then I laugh, like I'll like start to chuckle, because I'll be like, something will happen, and I'll be like Jeff just totally would have yelled at me for, like, well, if you had gloves on, that wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
And so you learn so much from the people that are around you and that have the knowledge prior to you, and it makes life easy, or easier. And we have to rely on each other. We have to be open to knowing, like, oh, I don't know that. And I can learn something from this person.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you said is important, and it's every like you decide, you get to take this information, and then it stays with you, it carries with you. You're standing on the shoulders because you said, I am going to do it this way, but I'm going to do this part differently. And that's with like any relationship, any kind of, and that's not just like intimate relationship or anything like that, but you start to learn, like, yes, I'm carrying this, but you're still carrying that person with you, because you're also carrying how you want to do it differently. And that, I think another kind of theme that has been carrying through this is also experience, right? Is you can learn so much. You can be taught only so much.
Yep.
But until you experience it, that's where you start to gain that knowledge, that like quote unquote intelligence comes from deciding and discerning and all of that. And like that was really special. Like I felt Andy, who took me out for most of my hunting, you know, at times I was like, oh, I would just want you to decide, you know, like I want you to, but he knew the importance of one, that it's my hunt, but also in the importance of that experience, right? Is that, yeah, I can be told what to do, but at the end of the day, the experience is what's going to make me successful in 3 hunts from now or next season or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
It's the adage of, right, teaching a man, right? Like it's corny, but teach a man, right? Like give a man a fish, feed him for the day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And right, it's the same thing with hunting and really with anything. And we can, you know, our teachers can put us in the scenario and we can execute and get it done. But what's going to happen when Andy's not there? You know, and what's going to happen when the story is different, the scenario is different.
And then he wasn't, and that happened. You know, it's like,
right.
I actually needed him to, like, I needed to know how to do certain things, like even just leading up to like setting my rifle on on an animal. And I was like, I don't know, when do I load my gun? When do I do this? When do I do that? You know, like all these things. And so there are like, it's that perfect balance of like, yes, he's going to have to tell me certain things. Right. And he did a great job of, similar to what you're doing, is, well, this is how I do it. Some people do it this way. And he was giving me this full kind of, range of information, so then I can really choose what feels right for me. And because then you are like, at some point you might be on your own, and I don't know.
And if I make anyone do something, I also give the reasoning so they understand why, right? Like why that decision was made. And how you can forecast making your own decisions similar to that in the future. Right? You know, when those deer, when I helped my buddy get his deer, when those deer came out, he wasn't in a good spot. Right? And it's like, all right, I want to get you up here to this log so you have something to shoot off of. So you have, right? But how are you going to get there? Right? Like you have to move when the deer's head is down, and right, there's all these decisions that you have to make very quickly, and you have to be able, and that just comes from the experience. Like when to move, how to move, right? It's when I got my bull elk, you know, he's standing there, we're standing there staring at each other, we're both in the open, we're both staring at each other. I have to move, I have to take action. And but when is the best opportune moment to do that? Right? How do I take action without scaring this animal? And just, it's that experience that, okay, understanding human nature, understanding animal nature, right? What's gonna freak an animal out? What's gonna, you know, cause them to do something? You know, why won't they move? When will they move? And it's taking that and then making your best educated decision off of that, and hoping that it works out in your favor.
And if it doesn't, that's, you carry that forward,
right?
You know, and that's, I mean, that's with even gardening. Like I was sharing before we started recording, it's my good friend's dad was a farmer who, like, it's those years of experience and quote unquote failures, which weren't failures, because like you are now carrying that information forward. And
Mm-hmm.
it's stuff, again, you can read in books, but until you're out there experiencing it, there's just things that are sensed that they can't be really described in words,
Yep.
um, that you gain in these I don't know, like disciplines, or in these
Mm-hmm.
really, like, I think the core of life, um, that is so incredible to come back to, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that can be applied to other areas, but we've been so disconnected from really the essence of survival that
Yep.
maybe we've lost a lot of that, even in the more frivolous, or just, again, the other everyday aspects of our life. Like, we think we can read it, we can learn it, and then that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can take someone else's, and that, like, someone else's experience or opinion, and that's enough. And it can be, but it's every step along the way is gaining more and more. And it reminds me of, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I said something about, oh, I'm really good at starting over because I've moved
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I've lived in a lot of places. I've had a lot of different careers. And
Mm-hmm.
the person corrected me, was like, it's not starting over. Even though it's a new career,
Yep.
or I moved to a new place, it's not starting over,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
did you tell me that? I can't remember
I
who
don't.
said it, but it was like, it's not starting over because you have all of this experience, even if it's totally different experience or a totally different place. Like, you have all of this that you're standing on, all of these
Yeah.
people, all of your own experiences that you are building off
Mm-hmm.
of, um, which I think is just a really neat perspective, to come back to.
Yeah. And that applies. Like I use my time spent hunting and jujitsu for me have had like the two biggest impacts on all of my life, because the things that I do in both of those, it bleeds into life,
Mm,
right? It's the concepts of those two things that I can apply to anything in my life.
mm,
And specifically hardships, like when I, right, just how hard both of those things are. And then when I get to something in life that is, you know, remotely hard, it's like, oh, I can just apply this concept from, hunting, and it makes my life that much easier because I'm not starting new. Like I have the experience.
mm,
And it's really cool to be able to take that and be like, yes, like, like it's that thought of like, yeah, no, I'm starting over, right?
mm,
It's a noble thought, right? It's like, oh, I'm starting over. I can start over, but really, you have all these years of experience in doing. It might be something that you think isn't related,
mm.
but it's absolutely related, and it absolutely applies to whatever it is that you're going through in life.
And maybe you use that idea to face your fears, right? To break
Mm-hmm.
down, those barriers to that maybe of stopping you from trying something new, or doing, again, a career change or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
um, we can so often do the imposters syndrome of, like, who am I? And then I always say, answer that question, go through and say
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that you've built for yourself up into this moment,
Mm-hmm.
um, even if they're not related. It that can be the fuel to build your confidence, right? The confidence to, make something not as intimidating or scary, because it's not really new, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just these everything, right, is a metaphor for life.
Yep. Well, and when you think about fear, right? Fear is usually attached to some made up story
Mm,
that doesn't exist, right? When I first started hunting, a lot of my fears were because I had never done it before. And like, oh my gosh, what if I kill something? What if, what if I get something? One of my big fears was always like, what if I get something at sundown and then I'm in the dark alone and I have to process this animal by myself? And like, for me, that was like this huge barrier and like this huge fear. And then just the more animals that I've harvested, the more so that thought has become, and like, I can harvest it, I can process it by headlamp, I can process, or like, I know what I'm doing. Right. And all these made up stories that, what if this, what if that, none of that's actually happened. And I've had to process animals in the dark, and you know what you're doing and you get it done. And these fears, like, that has really dictated, like, well, why am I afraid? And usually you're afraid because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And even in hunting, it's like, yeah, I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to move forward, even though I'm afraid. And it's not that we're not afraid. It's just that we know that no matter what, we're going to be okay.
I think what's important is, like, we talked a lot about like survival skills, and I think a lot of times these like survivalists are like the planning for, again, okay, start planning your own food, or hunting, or have your generator, or what, like, be able to survive for 90. No, you can survive for 90 days, and I think sometimes that can be misconstrued as, oh, you're afraid that, you're planning for this apocalypse or whatever it might be. And I personally don't feel that it stems from fear. Like, I don't live in fear that there's going to be a cyber pandemic or everything's going to shut down. It's just that I've realized just how important the basics and again, coming back to the like simple life, how the basics, how important they are.
Yep.
And like, why not put more energy into just really put energy into that instead of the things that have started to create these fight or flight simulations in our body that aren't significant. Like, put energy into what is significant. I don't know. Yep. It's not, I just want to emphasize, like, we're not in this preparedness because we're afraid. Or I'm not going to speak for you. It's not because I'm afraid. It's because I find that these are the important things in life.
Yes. Yeah, no, I don't operate out of fear, and the Texas thing was like a prime example, and like it reassured me, because when it happened, and there was like chaos and panic, and I'm just like, right, like, it's not about, like, it's about being confident and like knowing what you're capable of and knowing what is important, right? Because if the electric grid goes down and everything goes down, right, none of this matters except for the simple things. Right? The food, the water, where are you going to get that? How are you going to survive? So it's not about operating out of fear. It's, like you said, it's truly understanding what is important. Right? Are my basic needs met? Can I survive? And when you realize that those are the things that matter, again, it makes life so much easier, because it doesn't matter if you have the biggest and best mountain bike or Louis Vuitton or this, because it doesn't matter. Right? And now, it's not to say that you don't want those things, right? You can absolutely still go get those things, but you also understand that those aren't necessarily the important things.
I love that. Right? I think that's a big distinguish. That's what I think you brought up. Actually, what I thought about earlier was deciphering between needs and wants, and it's okay to have wants.
Yeah, and it's, don't beat yourself up for wanting a Louis Vuitton purse or right, like the biggest and best new Tesla, or right, like understand that that's not your needs. Right, and understand, right, like meet your basic needs first, understand what it takes, and appreciate, be mindful of your basic needs. And then, right, because to not have wants, like you want to have to strive for something, right? Like I love waking up in the morning to strive. Like, my want, it's not a need. My want is to get a 6x6 bowl now. Right. And that's just me wanting to one up myself. Right. When really I need meat in the freezer. Right. And you experienced this, right? Like you got a good taste of this, right, for your elk season. Right. It's understanding the difference and knowing that it's okay. Right. Like it's not, don't, like we got to stop shaming on both sides, right? Like quit shaming people first off, but we got to stop shaming people for wanting something, like wanting $1,000 pair of shoes. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
Right. But I also like to dress nice on occasion. Right. So let people want what they want. Just don't confuse the two.
Yeah. And I think it's where, I guess what I would expand on is, it's when you get them mixed up, your wants, when you think your wants are needs, is where it starts to control you, like, or control, again, your peace or your ease or equanimity in life. And I think that's really, have your wants, but see them again as separate from you, from who you truly are or what you truly need. And also know that you're the creator of all those wants, right?
Right.
Which means that you also can create something different, right? If you have these wants and you're still incredibly unhappy, what good are fulfilling those wants?
Absolutely. Yeah, you should be happy with or without them. Right? Happiness is found in the moment. It's found in the journey to get those wants. It's found in having those wants. Right, like,
or not having those wants.
Right. It's all part of it, and you have to find that happiness, no matter where you're at. Right, and you have to find that happiness in those moments of suffering. And when you wake up and you're surrounded by snow in the tent, that, like, two thoughts happen, like not even being there. I've been there, but not even being there. Two thoughts immediately occur when you said that. Right, the first one is fuck. Like,
well, let me tell you, middle of the night, we had it was a 3-season tent. Okay, so it's like,
that's wonderful.
One of the lightweight Big Agnes, so the whole inside is like mosquito netting, is that mesh, and then we had our fly, but we kind of were like, we didn't do our prime rain fly setup, and I'll wake up to, I kept hearing the snow hitting all night, and then woke up at like probably 1:00 in the morning, and the tent's like caving in, and we like hit the roof, the side, and it all slides down, and it's stuck on the sides, and we're just like hitting this whole tent. And like, I was like, I was like, what time is it? 1 a.m. I was like, oh gosh, we've got like 4.5 more hours.
And it's right, like in that moment, like, fuck, like, because, and I get it, like I've been there, I've had to smack, right, even with rainwater, whatever it is, and you're just like, oh, like I have 4 more hours of this before I have to get out of my sleeping bag and step into this, right? Like you're just thinking of like all the terribleness that it is. But then on the other hand, it's also like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
The hardest part is like that first step with everything. But it was like, you're like, oh, do I want to do this? And then you start doing it and you're like, oh, of course.
So I'll share a quick hunting story. And again, it just shows right, the point of the story is to like talk about resilience and like when you learn to suffer better, right, life becomes easier, life becomes more simple. And so was it 2 years ago? It was elk rifle season. Me and my buddy, we figured it out where we wanted to go, and we were going to hike 5 miles in to this area, and we are going to camp, and we had to do it separate because he had his anniversary. And so I hiked in. I like sent him my GPS coordinates. I'm like, all right, we had already figured this out, like where camp would be. And so I hiked in, and it was just covered in snow, like a huge snowstorm. And I had like spring boots on. I did not have winter boots. And I'm like trudging through the snow in like these lightweight spring, season boots. And I'm hiking, and I had to cross a creek. And of course I fell in the creek. And the boots are like waterproof, sort of. But right, like when you're trudging through the snow forever and then you fall in a creek, things become less waterproof. And so I get to camp, my feet are cold. I get to camp, and the sun's starting to go down. And I was like, all right, my goal is get my tent set up, get my sleeping bag in there, eat something real quick, get into the tent, and just go to sleep and then wake up in the morning. My buddy was probably going to get there probably around like midnight, like 1 a.m. This was our first hunting season together. And so I'll say this comment now, and then I'll Tarantino it. I said before we started recording, right? Like, you don't know someone until you've taken a shit next to them, right? And if you've never been backpacking or hunting with someone, or like long treacherous hikes, like, right, like that's where you get to meet the person that you're with. Right, like we can be this like bubbly type person and like everything's hunky-dory, but it's not until shit goes south when you actually meet the person.
You can only hold your farts in for so long.
Right? Yes, so true. Right, like you really can. And so I'll say that to say this, right? So I got there, I get set up, and I get my sleeping bag, and I have like a 0-degree sleeping bag and a 3-season tent. It's just in feet of snow. And it is fucking bitter cold. It is so cold out. And I'm in my sleeping bag, and I have like a pair of long johns and just like a long sleeve shirt. And that's it. Right? Because the point of being in a sleeping bag, for those that don't know, is, right, like you want to have as minimal stuff on as possible because you let your body heat do the work. Well, my body heat was not up for the task. And like I'm shivering. I'm in my sleeping bag just shivering. And I'm like, all right, let me get out and put on another layer. And I eventually do this enough times that I am now wearing everything in my backpack. I have, hoodies, I have jackets on, I have down jackets on, down pants in my down sleeping bag. And I'm no longer shivering, but I am not cold. And I'm like, okay, like I should be able to get through the night in this. Right, I'm cold, but I won't die, and that's the main goal: is don't die. And sometimes that's a really good goal, right? So around, I think it was like midnight, I hear my buddy come crunching through the snow. And again, this is our first hunting season together, and I say this, right, and I go back to, right, like you don't know someone until you've taken a shit next to them, because had that been our second hunting season, or had we known each other better, it wouldn't have been an option, right? Like it would have been, Jeff, get your ass in my fucking tent and warm me up, right? Like I am freezing, like you need to get in here and create body heat with me. And because we didn't know each other right that well yet, it was like he set up his own tent. And like I suggested, I was like, hey, you can just climb into my tent if you want. Right? Like it was like a hard suggestion, but like of course, again, like we're both learning each other, like we're on this journey of friendship together. And so like he sets up his tent, so we're both in our 2-man tents, separate, freezing. He's in all of his clothes, I'm in all of mine, when really if we would have just gotten the same fucking tent, life would have been so much better. And now I joke about it with him. I say this all the time. I was like, if that were ever to happen again, your ass is getting in my tent. Like, you rely, like you take any opportunity to get an ounce of warmth when you're in a situation like that. Mm-hmm. And so we woke up the next morning ready to hunt. And so, recap, trudged through the snow for 5 miles, fell into a creek, right, in spring boots, woke up, and my boots are icicles. Mm-hmm. Literal ice. Like, there is a sheet of ice around my boot. My boot is frozen solid. It doesn't move, nothing. And I had to put my foot in it. And it was the most miserable thing ever, was having to put my foot in these boots. And I did it, and I put my foot in these icicles, these ice frozen boots, and got up, and we hunted that day, trudging through the snow some more, looking for elk. Of course, we didn't find anything. But, I say all of that to just say, like, it's having those experiences. It's, right, like being resilient. It's understanding, like that fuck moment. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't want to put those boots on, mm-hmm. but I had to. And going forward, like, I didn't want to sleep in a tent by myself, and next time I won't. Right? But like, it's being in those moments with other people that creates the hardships that helps you become more resilient and learn, oh, I need other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's back to like how much better is life with the village too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think if the story is over, journal prompt maybe.
Well, I do have so I want to share one more thing.
Okay.
Because we talked about it before recording, and and it goes along the same lines of having people with you and just how close you get to people. And so, mm-hmm. on this last archery trip, my buddy Ganesh was with me, and it just goes back to, right, the thought of consumption and everything that we've talked about today. You have weird conversations with your friends out there. You're farting, you're pooping, you're doing all the things that, bodily functions happen, like everything. It's just part of just being out there with your people. And at one point on this trip, I asked my buddy Ganesh, I was like, what's your dream? Like, he's a PhD. He's literally, it's funny. I don't remember exactly what his degrees are in, but he literally has a degree in rocket science. And one of his degrees are in rocket science, but it's not. And when I joke around, I call him a rocket scientist. And then, like, he told me what it was, and it's like so much more than rocket science. Like, it's not less than rocket science. It's like, he's like, well, yeah, rocket science is a part of it, but then there's all this other stuff too that goes with it. And then, like, he has a PhD in wind energy, and just a really, right, educated, smart guy. And I was just like, what's your dream? And his dream, it really shocked me, but he said his dream was to be a rancher. And I was like, wow, and like, we talked more about it, and he has all these degrees, and he's so smart, and this doesn't make him any less of a person, right? But his dream's to be a rancher. And in talking about why, his why is all based on those things. It's based on the science. It's based on the things that he's done in life, and he knows the importance of ranching on the world, and how ranching can impact global warming, and how, or we don't call it global warming anymore, we call it climate change. Right, how becoming a rancher can make sustainable food sources for people, animal protein sources. And so it was just really cool to hear that perspective of, right, you think someone with like these degrees in like rocket science and and PhDs, and you think of like these big cities, these tech people, and here he is just wanting to ranch.
Yeah, but it's the solution is in the simple things.
Yeah.
Right, and it's what we've been disconnected from, and it's like you say, just ranch it, but it's every single human, and whether if you're a vegetarian, then a farmer, we can replace rancher with farmer, but something that it is the foundation of what every single human needs.
Yep.
So this simple thing can have the most complex and huge impact.
Yep.
And that's with I think that's why I'm in the work that I'm in, is because I believe in a sustainable, the way that we'll move into a sustainable future is through the root, and it's those mindfulness components.
Yep.
Right? It's that being conscious in your consumption. It's I don't need to be, featured on, I don't know. I can't even think of a magazine, like I don't need to be like businesswoman of the year or this, that, and the other, or be acknowledged for. Actually, someone recently was like, they were asking about, we're sharing something about me and what I do, right? Like yoga therapists, and then they said, well, does she have a degree? And they're like, I don't even know. And I was like, that's the coolest thing. Talk to me 10 years ago and you'd be like, of course I have a degree, like, and it's like, but who cares if you have a degree? It doesn't matter.
Right. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? That's what matters.
Absolutely.
What are you doing?
How are you impacting the world? How are you impacting the village?
Yeah. And change starts at the village. We try to do this top down, right? We try to do this we want to make laws and all these things to regulate from the top down, but real change is going to come from the village, from the one person, and then the village and local, and that's how you make change.
Yep. And that's why, like, the importance of like voting is always important at all levels, but the real impact comes when you vote in your city level. Right? It's the people you're electing at the city level, the mayors, the treasurers, the people that are making decisions for your village. Right? It's that's what's really important. Love it.
Now journal prompt?
It's now journal prompt. So grab your journals, and there was a lot we talked about in this episode, right? So grab your journals and maybe think about, right, if you're a long-time listener, think about like the breath that we offer on every episode. Sometimes it's at the beginning, sometimes it's in the middle, at the end, right? But we offer breath on every episode, and think about that, and maybe write about that. And has that had an impact on you and your life? Maybe that's all you write about today. But maybe it's not. Maybe you start writing about your thoughts on, like, you've wanted to get into hunting or farming, or right, and like farming is such like this grand word, this grand scale, right? Maybe it's just buying a lettuce grow tower like Bre has, and right, like right, like that's the beginning phases of farming. It's creating this sustainable food source for Bre, right, for vegetables for her to be able to give to her village. Think about and really write about this. And we didn't talk too much about this, right? But we did talk about conscious consumption, right? My goal in life is to give more to the village than what I consume. And right, I don't want to take more than I can provide. And ask yourself, like, are you taking more than you provide? Right? Like being part of the village is part of it is taking. Part of it is, right, like me taking knowledge from my buddy Jeff, from, Bre, from all these people, right? But what am I giving back? And am I making my village better? And just write about that, and write about how you can be better at, giving back to your village. And what is it that you offer? Bre brought up the imposter syndrome, and list what you bring to the village. Mm-hmm. You are valuable to the village, right? And there's ebbs and flows. There's different seasons, right? You're going to take more than you give sometimes. You're going to give more than you take at other times. But just know, right, like, what is it that you provide? And maybe you're, to Bree's point, right, maybe you're not a hunter, but you appreciate where the meat comes from, and you appreciate the hunter. But maybe you're the farmer, or maybe you're the mother. And then also think about how your education, and write about your education and how it's impacted how you treat other people. Mm. Right? We all deserve, we briefly mentioned it, right? Like in the 2016 election, there was this thought of middle America shouldn't be able to vote because they're uneducated. And it's everyone who deserves their voice. Everyone has a right to their voice and their opinion because that's their truth. Mm. And we can't take that. We don't deserve to take that from anyone. It's not up to you to take.
And if their education is different than yours, why is yours better?
Yeah.
Right. So like, again, those differences, right?
Mm-hmm. And think about how they're helping you and how you're helping them. Mm-hmm. Because we're all valuable. We all provide this value. And it's just different. And we got to stop comparing ourselves in the sense of this, I'm better, this is better. Right? And especially based off who you vote for. Like, that's just craziness. Yeah, anything to add to that?
No, I think you nailed it.
So. Cool. Well, enjoy until the next time, everyone. Bre, it was a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I think any new listeners, welcome. If you're starting mid, I don't know what you would even call it. We don't have seasons, so. Mid now. Hello.
Episode, what is this? Episode 24?
Yes. Well, we're just yogis. We're in a timeless state,
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting and waking up and spending your morning with me.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right, chat. All right, bye.
Bye. If you want to follow us and our adventures, you can find both of us on Instagram. I'm at Bre Allison. That's BreAllison.
And I am at The Life of Alan Tatone, underscores between each word. To check out our offerings, yoga, one-on-one trainings, workshops, retreats, and a recorded library, you can find the info on our website, thehunterandthehippie.com.
If you have questions for the podcast, about the podcast, feedback, suggestions, or just want to say hi, or find ways to work with us, our email is thehunterandthehippiepodcast@gmail.com. And don't worry, all of this will be in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hopefully you weren't tuned out.
To the Hunter and the Hippie podcast.